That is one of the richest videos you will ever see on Twitter. Antifa protesters requesting that George Soros pay them their money. Real life LARPers claiming that they are Antifa. Folks, I'm going to give you a big boil down of my analysis, my breakdown, the reason why I believe it is quote unquote liberal or leftist media that is inciting a civil war and trying to start a coup against our president, our elected president, Donald Trump. George Soros is behind a lot of that, and Antifa is behind a lot of the violence. But after this weekend, what we saw in Charlottesville and the response, we have a clear narrative to demonize the right, to demonize Trump supporters, and to put them all into the same box and label them as Nazis or KKK or white this or supremacist that. And this is all in an attempt to bastardize the patriot movement and make it impossible for us to have a right to free speech without being deemed racist or this or the other thing. But if you actually look at the cases, you look at the facts, and you look at what we know, well, it turns out that it's not the right that is responsible for this at all. It's actually the left. Let's start with what Project Veritas exposed. Undercover videos lead to Democrat operative firing, force another to distance himself from the DNC. Of course, that's Bob Kramer, that's Scott Fovel, that's them admitting in the videos how they, well, Fovel admits in the videos that he recruits mentally ill people to be disruptors on the streets at political events. That's what Fovel admits in the video. Bob Kramer also admits to being in talks with some of the top people in the Democrat Party, taking directives from some of the top people at the Democrat Party, including Hillary Clinton. This is a man, Bob Kramer, who visited the White House hundreds of times when Obama was president. Both outed by Project Veritas as people that are espousing to incite violence at political events, specifically against Donald Trump. So Project Veritas exposes that. It gets covered everywhere. Democratic heads roll after video shows agitators planted at Trump rallies. That's right, they plant agitators. They plant stories. They plant Donald Ducks. That was a Hillary Clinton direct order. They have people like Aaron Black, who says he was responsible for shutting down the Chicago Trump rally, where violence ensued. Again, leftists. The story goes on. Undercover footage shows Clinton operatives admit to inciting anarchy at Trump rallies. James O'Keefe tweets out, wow, Fox News just canceled my appearance. Are these publicly traded media corporations afraid of the Justice Department reprisals, retaliation? So yeah, O'Keefe gets absolutely bombshell video. He does a series of videos talking about how the DNC is working on rigging elections, how the Democrats are working on starting violence at rallies, starting violence in the streets, and you can't even get mainstream news to cover it, folks. Amazing. So again, Bob Kramer, Scott Fovel, Democrat operatives ousted after James O'Keefe sting videos. In the raw, evidence from their mouth admitting what they do. Here's Breitbart. Robert Kramer visited Obama's White House over 340 times. The political consulting firm Democracy Partners is at the center of the Project Veritas investigation, exposing Democrat operatives instigating violence at Trump rallies and plotting potential voter fraud. Again, from their mouths in undercover video. Did you ever hear Barack Obama disavow Bob Kramer? Did Barack Obama disavow Democracy Partners that have admitted that they recruit mentally ill people to stir up violence on the street, that have admitted they started violence to stop Trump rallies? Has Obama disavowed that? Has Hillary Clinton disavowed that? Has left media disavowed that? No, they won't even address it. Exclusive, O'Keefe video sting exposes bird dogging Democrats' effort to incite violence at Trump rallies. So yes, the term bird dogging is what they use. What the Democrat operatives out on the streets call bird dogs. The goal of bird dogging, to create a sense of anarchy around Donald Trump that would undermine his political support. The tactic uses the most vulnerable people, including the elderly and disabled, to maximize shock value. And again, this isn't just made up. This isn't just conjecture. This is coming from the actual Democrat operatives' mouths. Okay? Cold, hard proof. Again, Project Veritas exposes more violence by leftists. Disrupt J20. In order to protest the 2017 inauguration, many groups teamed up for an event they were calling Disrupt J20. The plan of this umbrella organization was to turn the inauguration into a cluster bomb. Project Veritas secretly embedded our journalists deep within Disrupt J20 to uncover their plots before they could put them into action. Some of their plans were so dangerous, we took an unprecedented measure and brought our footage to the CIA, Secret Service, and DC Metro Police, which led to an arrest. They meet these leftist, Antifa, terrorist thugs at Comet Pizza, of all places, in Washington, D.C., and because of the plots that they exposed, here it is. In this video, Project Veritas investigators undercover a group known as the DC Anti-Fascist Coalition, plotting to disrupt President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration by deploying butyric acid at the National Press Club during the Deplorable event scheduled for July 19th. I was at that event. They would have butyric bombed me. That's a terrorist. That is a political terrorist, a leftist, Antifa thug that gets arrested for what they said on film exposed by James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. So, incredible work from Project Veritas. Now, WikiLeaks, you have the same stuff. Smoking gun email confirms DNC involvement in inciting violence at Trump rallies. It's pretty amazing, folks. You know who's in these emails? Bob Kramer. You know what the subject is of the email thread? Trump rapid response. We caught him red-handed, folks. These are the people inciting all that violence. How about this one? You remember this? Trump rushed off Reno stage after someone yells gun. So Trump gets rushed off the stage. This man gets arrested. Where is this man's name? I'll find it. Austin Kreitz. So Austin Kreitz gets arrested trying to storm the stage at a Trump rally. He's able to do an interview later that night. Somehow wasn't arrested. Just detained, I suppose. But then guess what? Guess what we find out about Austin Kreitz? He's in WikiLeaks. He's in multiple attachments in the WikiLeaks. But I'm sure that is just a coincidence. Let's not forget, when we talk about political violence, top U.S. Republican Steve Scalise shot by Bernie Sanders supporter. Now, let's recall this story. The New York Times prints a story talking about loose security at a softball practice, a baseball practice with congressmen that are Republicans. Steve Scalise reads this story, apparently moves to Virginia, stakes out the field, asks a couple people, hey, are those Republicans or Democrats? They're Republicans. Okay, pulls out his rifle and fires off multiple rounds. Luckily, he couldn't shoot the broadside of a barn, and he was only able to hit a few people without killing anyone. Luckily, this could have easily been multiple assassinations, multiple murders, and luckily it wasn't. That close. But don't forget, did the left disavow Hodgkinson? You could barely even get him to report on it. Steve Scalise shot by Bernie Sanders supporter. Why would a Bernie Sanders supporter want to shoot a GOP congressman? I don't know. Maybe because Bernie Sanders said the GOP healthcare bill is worse than 9/11. That might motivate a nut job to go out and try to kill a Republican congressman. This is what Bernie said. Now, obviously, nobody can predict exactly how many people will die if they lose their coverage. Nobody can make that prediction. But what experts at the Harvard School of Public Health estimate is that if 23 million Americans were to be thrown off the insurance they currently have, which is what the GOP bill would do, up to 28,000 Americans every single year could die. That is 9 times more than the tragic loss we suffered on 9/11 every single year. Oh yeah, and 9/11 that they tell us is done by radical terrorists, but they also tell us that radical terrorism doesn't exist. Radical Islamic terrorism, that is. But back to the issue at hand, You don't think that Bernie Sanders' rhetoric might have led a person like James Hodgkinson to go and shoot a Republican congressman? I didn't hear Bernie disavow his rhetoric. I didn't hear the left calling out that type of rhetoric that led to political violence and almost multiple assassinations. Nope, it's funny how that just falls through the cracks. But that's not even the last of that political violence. Anti-Trump nutjob arrested for murder of GOP committeeman neighbor. Now look at this story in the Washington Post. AP fact check. No evidence, killer motivated by Trump hatred. That's the headline. Now let me read to you the first paragraph. Police and prosecutors have no evidence that the fatal shooting of a Republican activist outside Philadelphia was politically motivated, despite online stories that strongly suggest his assailant was inspired by hatred of President Trump. They must have changed this because I swear it used to be in the first paragraph, but I bet they changed this. Folks, he had anti-Trump signs in his yard. The victim, Brooks Jennings, was a GOP committeeman, and Carter had anti-Trump signs in his yard. So the headline says, fact check, no evidence, killer motivated by Trump hatred, but they admit that the man he killed was in the GOP and he had anti-Trump signs in his yard. Last time I checked, that's what you call evidence, but not according to the headline in the Washington Post. Not where democracy dies in darkness, folks, where journalism is dead. But this is what the fake news does. Here's PolitiFact. InfoWars' Alex Jones falsely says George Soros, Hillary Clinton instigated Charlottesville violence. This is new from PolitiFact. Says Alex Jones is a pants-on-fire liar for this. Okay, so I'm about to show you how pants-on-fire PolitiFact is. First, you say there's two elements that PolitiFact is wrong on. First, they say he falsely says George Soros is instigating violence. That we can prove in spades. Secondly, the insinuation that Hillary Clinton is insinuating violence. I just broke down for you all of the WikiLeaks, and not even all of them, just a couple. There's so many more. And the Project Veritas videos that prove that top Democrats are well aware of this street agitation and well aware that they are behind it. But according to PolitiFact, none of that exists. Aaron Black doesn't exist. Bob Kramer doesn't exist. Scott Foval doesn't exist. They weren't fired either. None of it exists. It just doesn't exist, according to PolitiFact. But let's look at the facts. George Soros donates $8 million to boost Hillary Clinton. Well, then by proxy, Alex Jones is right, isn't he? But let's go on. Even the leftist media. Huffington Post. George Soros backs Hillary Clinton for president in 2016. So again, by proxy, Soros, Democrats, violence in the streets. It's all there. Clinton emails. Billionaire Soros said he regretted backing Obama. Oh, Soros, Obama, Soros, Democrats, Obama, Kramer, Clinton, Kramer, political violence in the streets. Soros. It's all there. But PolitiFact says it doesn't exist. PJ Media, Soros-funded group gave $50,000 to goons who provoked Berkeley riot. And there it is. No longer do we have to relate by proxy. We have the exact correlation. The Alliance for Global Justice, an organization funded by the Tides Foundation, a George Soros-backed charity, gave $50,000 to help fund a radical left group that used violence to shut down an event at the University of California, Berkeley, featuring Milo Yiannopoulos. So there it is, folks. George Soros funding leftist violence. PolitiFact, you are politifraud. But they're going to pretend this doesn't exist. You remember what happened in Berkeley? People burning the school to the ground practically. Milo Yiannopoulos is not allowed to have free speech. Look who funds the group behind the call to arms at Milo's Berkeley event. George Soros. So there you go. Again, everyone knows it's true. But it doesn't stop there. Let's flash back. Even Infowars.com, this was a big story in 2014. We were ahead of the curve on this. Soros-supported protest turned violent in Ukraine. This is a classic George Soros technique, a divide and conquer technique, fund street protest, agitate people, have people in on both sides to get the agitation going, and then bring in the control after the collapse, after the Civil War. Amazingly, just like we had in America, people marching at night with torches, that's exactly what you had in Ukraine before their protests turned violent. So you see the correlation here? You see how this stuff kind of seems to have a pattern? Now, they want to demonize Trump about this. They want to demonize the right about all this. But here's the Washington Post again. Trump's claim tying violence at his rallies to the Clinton campaign. His claim. And then they write this whole article demonizing Trump. This is a month before the election. They write this entire article demonizing Trump because of his claim that the violence is tied to Clinton. Well, I just documented how all of those claims that Trump made are right. Then again, the Washington Post tries to demonize Trump. Trump questions who is really behind anti-Semitic threats and vandalism. So they want to take one thing Trump says and put it in a box because they don't understand how he's speaking to a larger context. And he's like, well, with some of this anti-Semitic stuff or with some of this stuff, you know, it's not exactly what it seems. He says it's the reverse. What's he talking about? In this exact story, I'm telling you, Washington Post proves themselves to be frauds in their own stories on a daily basis. Trump questions who is really behind anti-Semitic threats and vandalism. And then they write the whole story how dare he use this reverse, how dare he say reverse, how dare he insinuate that anti-Semitic behavior doesn't exist, even though that's not what he said. All he said was that sometimes it's the reverse. And then in the very story, they have how there was a man, a Jewish man from Israel, who got arrested for calling in bomb threats to Jewish community centers. So there's an example of what Trump is saying being right in the story that they're writing, saying he's wrong. And let's not forget this. Media loses interest in Houston mosque after Muslim was charged with arson. So the media was all interested in covering this story when they could blame white nationalists and the right wing. And then when they found out that it was a Muslim, they lost interest. So folks, look, it's obvious where the violence is coming from. You probably already know it by now, but we need to get this message out. We have to get ahead of this. We cannot let this country succumb to civil war because of fake news. And the overall arching story here, the overall big story that they're trying to twist, you look at Heather Heyer, the girl who died because somebody ran her over in a car. Just terribly sad. A car that, again, I'm not justifying anybody running anybody over with a car. That is ridiculous. That is clearly a nut job that does this. But his car is getting hit by protesters before it happens. Nobody wants to blame them. But the overall thing that we need to be asking, what was Heather doing out there to begin with? Why was Heather marching? What was Heather protesting? Well, Heather was out there protesting because the Democrats, the ACLU, the liberal media told her to be out there protesting. The Women's March, Linda Sarsour, Robert Reich, Hollywood, Madonna, they told her to go out there and protest. They told Heather to go out and to protest. Even after she's dead, they say that they will continue to fight for the struggle that Heather was protesting for. What was she protesting for? Fake news. You see, Heather was told that Trump was a racist. Heather was told that Trump supporters are racist. Heather was told that we hate Muslims, we hate Latinos, we basically hate black people, we hate everybody. We're all a bunch of white nationalist bigots. A total lie. That Trump is a Russian agent. That Trump was elected by Russia. A total lie. They told you before the election Hillary Clinton was going to win, undoubtedly, building up your confidence only to completely destroy you in the end. That's why Heather was out there protesting, folks. So for all of the liberal media that wants to blame the right wing for the death of Heather, you better take a look in the mirror and ask yourself, if it wasn't for me, would Heather even have been out there in the first place? For Infowars.com, this is Owen Schroyer.
You think our information's hardcore? You think our focus is brutal? Try our nutraceuticals. Try our supplements. We've taken Brain Force and made it Brain Force Plus. Now at 20% more in the bottle and an even more hardcore formula. You owe it to yourself to get these products. They really have worked for myself, my family. They have 5-star reviews by the thousands. Secure your Brain Force Plus today at InfoWarsLife.com. Now 20% stronger. Again, InfoWarsLife.com.